go in life. Still nobody knows, but I'ma choose what's right and take what comes and goes. And ain't no one in life holding me back no more. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays. Way back a year ago.
Hello, welcome to Behind the Pencil. I'm Bill Vazozzi, and I'm joined today by Rhiannon Owens. Rhiannon, hello.
Hi. Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, for the people at home that don't know, you, Rhiannon, are an artist, obviously. Man, talking about fumbling on the goal line. I had it. But you've been working on trading cards for 13 years, 14 years?
13 and some change.
Yeah, in terms of Marvel trading cards and sketch cards, you're definitely one of the longest tenured artists. You've done incredible work, and even your earlier stuff, which you'll poo-poo, but it was all great, and we love it. So I'm very happy that you're here. I'm grateful that you would donate this little bit of your time to spend with us and talk about your story. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really grateful and hope I don't talk too much.
I don't know what would give you that idea. So the easiest place to start is, where are you from?
I currently live in Mississippi. I used to live in Florida. Florida is where I was when I got started. I was there for 25 years, and I was a military kid, so I moved around a lot. Originally, I was born overseas in Japan. But Florida is where my career started, and Mississippi on the Gulf Coast is where I'm at currently. Still doing all the cards. All of them.
Yeah. In a pretty small town, right?
Yeah. So I actually just found this out this weekend. I live in a small city right above Biloxi that is less than 50 years old. It was founded in 1988. It
Wow.
just fell in my lap, that information. But so yeah, I'm 7 miles from the Gulf Coast. So
probably before then it was just swamp.
Yeah, and there are parts of it that are still swamp. And the thing that makes living here easy is that it feels like Florida. The weather's the same. It's just not as crowded and it's not as expensive. So the cost of living here is really low, and it's maybe 1/3 the population. So there's no traffic ever, which is amazing.
Wow. And we just sold 1,000 Due Mississippi bumper stickers. So, Rhiannon, you've been drawing since you were a child. Your father was an artist, but early on you would copy panels and covers from comics.
Yes.
What were some of the earlier issues that you remember working from?
So as a kid, X-Men was the first comic I ever got, and Silvestri was the artist at the time. And then I quickly fell into classic X-Men, which was maybe 20 issues deep at that point. And so Arthur Adams and Mark Silvestri and John Byrne, when I got into the graphic novels, like the Dark Phoenix saga and all of that, I would copy just characters at first, singularly. And then when I got a bigger sketchbook, I started trying to do covers. And I specifically remember Uncanny X-Men 225, which was the first issue of The Fall of the Mutants in 1987. That Dazzler and that Rogue that Silvestri did, which were pretty simplistic because it was like a group shot from a distance. It wasn't like hyper detailed. I actually have a copy of that Dazzler in my storage unit. One of the times I tried to draw it, and we're horrible.
Yeah, Fall of the Mutants, great storyline. So, for X amount of time, you're kind of like working from the source material, kind of getting your rhythm and the muscle memory of drawing the characters. At what point does it go from I'm drawing them as I see them on this page to like these are the characters in my own image now, and you've kind of like morphed them. You take the ones on the page, and whether it's like a different pose or a different costume or a different facial expression, how does that happen? Because someone like me, I'm not artistically inclined. It's like voodoo to me.
Right. So I think I have in storage an old sketchbook that has a lot of those copied pictures. And I remember I would draw the X-Men religiously. I really didn't care about anybody else at the time. Page after page after page of, here's Storm from an Arthur Adams image. Here's Wolverine from a Mark Silvestri panel. Here's Cyclops from a John Byrne panel. And I don't know why I chose this character specifically, but there was a shot of Longshot that I tried to draw on my own, and it was horrendous. Like, I even remember back then looking at it going, this is really horrible. So I just didn't have the confidence to draw without looking at reference material. Because when I did, it didn't look like what I was trying to copy when I copied things. So when my parents split in 92 and I ended up in Florida, I went to a magnet program high school for visual and performing arts and auditioned to get in. And suddenly I was surrounded by people who were artists. I was no longer a novelty. I wasn't the odd kid in class drawing in a sketchbook. Like, we all had sketchbooks. We were all drawing on the classes I took. And this was in 1992 when the X-Men had exploded after the Jim Lee reboot and the cartoon. So everyone was drawing the X-Men. And I'm like, well, I don't feel so special anymore. We were all looking at each other's work. I mean, in the printmaking room and the sculpture room, there were paper on the tables. So, I mean, every free chance we got, we were doodling on the table. So we were kind of like leaving, graffiti for each other to critique when we came in behind one another. And remember, there were a handful of guys who were drawing, Cyclops and Wolverine and Bishop. And they were good. They were really good. And I felt like, well, damn it, I'm going to have to step my game up. And so I started practicing more when we were doing things like anatomy studies or figure studies. I did my assignments, which were not, we were specifically told, do not draw comic books in this classroom. I remember my art professor in high school literally said, you will never have a career if you do this for a living. If you try to do this for a living, this is a joke. And side note, I went back years later when they did it.
I know you did.
I know. She had Alzheimer's, and I was so disappointed because I wanted to go, hey, look what I'm doing now. And she's like, I'm sorry, I don't remember you. But when I was surrounded by other artists, I was encouraged to kind of break out of my comfort zone and start doing this in a way that was mine. So my proportions were horrible. My faces were extra long. The eyes were like too close together. The noses were like, it was bad, but I tried. And the more I tried, the better I got. So those 4 years in that high school are really what encouraged me to stop looking at something or copying things, but also taught me that eventually I could if I just kept at it.
Yeah. So it's interesting because not everybody who's interested in art or the arts has access to classes like that. And it seems like it was just the environment alone was important in your development as an artist, but there had to be like a technical aspect to it. Like, what were some, like, from a fundamental standpoint, what were some like art concepts that you were exposed to and maybe got a better understanding for there that you maybe might not have figured out on your own without the classroom setting?
So in high school, because it was a high school, not a college, we actually almost never did like live figure drawing. There were a few times that we, did each other in class. Like, that was the assignment. Pair off with someone, and then you got to do 2 gestural poses or 2 whatever. But the art professor who eventually ended up having Alzheimer's and didn't remember me, she was huge on color theory and color relationships. Like she loved giving assignments where here's a piece of colored paper. You have two colors that you can use, and you have to have a medium, a light, and a dark value. No black, no white. Make it work. So in school, I really gained an appreciation for color relationships, and learning to see that, if you're wearing white, you're not just wearing white. That white is reflecting all this color around you. So in order to actually look like you're in this environment or setting that you're in, you have to use some kind of hue that reflects, even things like skin, where, parts of your skin are not as tan as others because, you're not always topless or strapless or whatever, shirtless. And then, if you want to make something interesting, don't just make it green, put some other colors in it so that it's not just a green leaf on a brown tree trunk with a blue sky. When I started doing cards, I really had a limited palette, but I also, the more Copic markers I accumulated over the years, I was like, oh, if I get these really light shades, then I can start moving that color around and doing things. And the more I used this material, the more I was able to rely on that. The anatomy and figure study just kind of came later, but composition was a big deal. Spatial relationships was a big deal. Perspective was a challenge, which I didn't necessarily not like, but it was very technical to me. There's math involved, lines, and I like fluid things and long flowy hair and capes and fabric. So, what I learned in school bled over slowly, and then the more I drew, the more I learned in school bled over, like that perspective in those buildings. Because then it was, I can't just draw, someone floating in a white space. I have to put them in the background. So,
wow,
that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot, and I'm sure someone who speaks art, gets it. But even I was able to keep up with, the importance of, one, that there's a lot, and two, the importance of all those, there's so much that goes into a given piece, and probably at your point, like all the training and the practice and the experience, it kind of just it operates on its own. But like each component, whether you're talking about the color theory or composition and perspective, all those had to be learned individually, independently, and progressed and gotten better at, for them to kind of like harmonize and to result in like what we see. It's not just like you woke up one day and it's like color by number,
Right.
So before you got into trading cards, because obviously that's like where you really became like a professional artist.
Yes.
And so I feel like I always put the line of demarcation, you get paid for your work, but once you start paying for your living expenses with your work, that's when you're a professional artist. So before that, with trading cards, had you sold any of your work?
I did. And I actually was hesitant to do that. As a kid, when people realized that I like to draw for a hobby, and I was drawing really mundane, typical things like fairies and unicorns. I remember people like, well, make sure you sign this so that when you become famous, I can make a lot of money off of this. And even though I had no concept of commodity and commercialism and all of that, as a kid, it just made me feel gross. So I really just, like, I have old artwork I refuse to sign, just be like, When I was in my late teens, early 20s, there was a store in Jacksonville, Florida, where I lived, where I had become friends with the owners of the store. It was a husband and wife. And my roommate, whom I went to high school with, also was an artist, although more of a hobbyist than me wanting to do something with it. And she just kind of dropped in a conversation with the owners of the store that day. Oh, well, she draws. She's an artist. She paints. She makes fairies. So they had nothing on their walls, and they were like, well, hey, if you want to sell your artwork, you know, you can put it on the wall because we need something on the walls here. And then, you will just take a small cut and then you make the rest. So I was like, oh, okay. And the thing that appealed to me was it was going to be anonymous. I wasn't going to be in there selling my art. My art was going to sell itself, and I didn't have to do any of the work. So it was like, here's 5 years worth of 18 by 24 sketchbooks of these watercolor fairies I used to paint. That I just went to Walmart and got like an $8 frame, and then, we're selling them for $100 maybe. And then they kept a small percentage. And then suddenly I was making money off of this, which I had just moved into my first apartment with my friend. So I was now like, oh, side income? Sure, I'll do it. So every free chance I got, I was painting. That was really the first commercial experience, like almost proprietary, but I had been paid for, commissions like portraits before, really simple stuff like that. Yeah, that shop, it was called Reflections. And they just sold like club clothes and jewelry. And it was in a place called 5 Points, which
and fairy paintings.
Yeah, they sold watercolored fairy paintings, which yeah. Amy Brown, when she came along and started selling all her fairies, I was like, I did this 10 years ago. You're late. How dare you? But she was commercial, and I was like, missed that mark.
Yeah. So is that like the path? Like you're just doing these fairy paintings for years, and then poof, like you're doing trading cards, or like what happened?
So, when I was younger and people were making those comments about make sure you sign this so I can sell it and make money off of you, that haunted me. And even after high school, where I had gained technical skill and still had plenty to learn, mind you, I really didn't have an interest in being a commercial artist or doing it full time. And one of my lesser positive traits is I can be really stubborn. So there was a part of me that just wanted to fight against making a living with art because, people were like, well, this is what you have to do. This is what you're good at. So this is where you're going to make your mark. And I was like, no, I'm not just a one-trick pony. Watch me go do all this other stuff. But when I started selling these paintings and reflections, they were selling well enough that I was making money every week. And they wanted more because they were making a small percentage. So the more they sold, the more they made. And it wasn't anything they had to do but hang it on a wall. So it was easy money for them. And this is where the whole I become a cash cow comes into play. And I'm like, I'm out. I literally just stopped going there one day. I went in to collect the money for like the last painting that was on the wall or something. And I was like, I'll see you guys later. And then just never spoke to them again. I never went back. I refused. I would doodle on a napkin at a restaurant or maybe rarely draw something for my mother. But for the most part, I was like, I'm done. I refuse to be forced into this box and expected to milk my talent to line your pockets at my own expense, because this was my free time. This was, my hobby. So the joy was being sucked out of it. And I didn't draw for 7 or 8 years. I was
stopped drawing for 7, 8 years, with the exception of doodles on napkins at restaurants.
Pretty much. And I was determined to prove that this was not all I was good at. I was determined to prove that I had more in me than just art. And the irony is the jobs that I had at the time had some kind of artistic element to it. Like I worked in a flower shop and we did like holiday decorating. So of course there's composition and color balance and, moving things around so that it's not all just like, matchy or one focal point. And then I worked in a kitchen plating food and doing desserts. So there's artistic elements to that. But I refused to be a 2D visual artist because I felt like I got a small glimpse of that pigeonholing and that pressure. And it made me ill. Like I almost resented myself. Like, you dummy, you shouldn't have done this. You knew better.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. What year was it that you like stopped drawing?
This was 97 or 8, maybe 99, maybe.
Okay, so I need you and everybody at home to stop for a second and think about how incredible this is. Like the one thing that even before I started doing these interviews that I would hear from artists is about the importance of practice and repetition and improving your craft. Like, 99% of people just don't wake up one day and they're incredible artists. Obviously, there's some people that I'm sure like there's a artistic genius, but everybody else, all the humans in the world, they have to actually work at it and bust their butt at it, and daily, multiple times a day. And not only did you do it, leave for a little bit, come back, do it some more, right? Like, you left for 8 years and then came back, and a hop, skip, and a jump later, you're a professional artist. Like,
Yeah.
can you acknowledge? Can you admit on the record that that's pretty incredible? A series of events.
No, and that's just me being stubborn. Because my journey, to me, flowed exactly how it was supposed to. And then, whether you want to chalk it up to fate, or you want to chalk it up to coincidence, or you want to chalk it up to being in the right place at the right time, I have been lucky in some instances in my life where certain things have literally just fallen into place or just happened right at the right time. And there was a small series of events that led to me getting into this work. But I was determined to prove that I wasn't just going to, like, the art was not all I could do. I was an entertainer. I used to do stand up, and I sang a little bit and danced, not stripper dancing, too fat for that, but other stuff. Because it was artistic, it was performing art, but it wasn't only visual. But I did eventually miss it. I stopped collecting comics, like even the visual media that I liked. I cut it all out because I was like, I refuse to just be one thing. So, I mean,
so you say that you missed it, but like, looking back now and where you're at in your life now, and what art is to you, like, would you say you need it?
no.
You don't think you need art as that creative outlet to express yourself and have that relief valve?
No, and the reason why, for me personally, I don't, is because that necessity was the chokehold that sucked the life out of it for me. And if I look at it as something I cannot live without, then I am also denying that I am capable of surviving. I mean, if I lose my hand tomorrow, I can't draw. I'll learn how to draw with my other hand. And there are people in the world who paint with their teeth and paintbrush in their tooth. But I have other skills, and I have other ways to be creative. I made the shirt I'm wearing from scratch. Like, I sew and I do other stuff. So I learned to not rely solely on art, because if for me personally, if I didn't, I wouldn't enjoy it. It would become this codependent, really unhealthy thing for me. And I did not want that. That was the whole reason in the beginning as a kid that I abhorred people saying, please sign this so I can make money off of it, because there's no joy in that for me. I'm not doing this to make other people money, which is ironic, because me doing these cards makes dealers money. And sometimes, flippers and people who liquidate their collections, they make money off of it. But I played an instrument as a kid. There's more than one kind of art, and my goal is to never just be one thing or one kind of person. And so I've learned to not be one kind of artist. Would my life lack some joy? Sure. But as a survivor of a lot of speed bumps and hiccups and a dark period from about 2012 to 2016, I learned how to get over those. So yeah, I don't think my life would end, but it would change for sure. I would just, I don't know, maybe make more clothes or go back to entertaining or something.
So I jumped ahead and I want to go back to how you got into cards, because it's a pretty kind of like, just kind of happened story, like we talk about things falling into place, and that's, believe it or not, that's a theme that I notice through. It's a parallel. It's consistent with artist stories, and I think it speaks to kind of like just following your heart, kind of, and like you said, things have fallen into place. So I think it's an incredible little story. It's 2008, right?
Yes.
2008, and so. Depending on your timeline, you said 97, 98, 99 is when you left, 8 years. So let's just say 1 to 3 years that you've been actively working on your art again. You're going to like conventions and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you're staying in a hotel room with some friends, and one of them is a active sketch card artist at the time, Jason Sobel.
Yep.
He's working for Rittenhouse Archives on the Fantastic Four archive set.
Correct.
Like in the same space as you over here, like doing a little doodle of Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, correct.
And you're like, oh, what are you working on? He's like, oh, I'm doing this and sketch cards and blah blah blah. And you're like, whoa, I didn't know those were a thing. Sorry, I'm dumbing it down. But like, and then he's like, what are you doing? Like, oh, I'm drawing. And he comes over. He's like, that's pretty good. And like, yada yada yada. Boom, you're a professional artist.
Yeah, that is the Cliff's Notes version of exactly how that happened. So I have to give credit to my friend Donnie Tracy, because I was working part-time in a comic book store that Donnie co-owned, and that is how I met Jason. So I had a series of really bizarre relationships, and then when the last one at that time was over, one of my roommates had been going to the store that Donnie co-owned and introduced me to a group of friends that I affectionately call the Nerd Herd, and I would go every week.
I like them already.
They would play Hero Clicks, or they would hang out and talk comic books. And I had stopped collecting, so I really wasn't in the know. I knew the old stuff, but I wasn't up to speed. And so I just sat there and I did what I used to do as a kid when I didn't know what to say. I started drawing again. So then I had a sketchbook, and here I am doodling. So I did, here's a picture of Storm, here's a picture of Rogue in that ridiculous 80s corseted Silvestri outfit. Here's, some dated stuff. And I end up going to conventions because Donnie's like, you're really good. You could probably sell your work. And then that was 2007. So I started going to the shop in 2006, started going to conventions. MegaCon 2007 was my first show. And then at Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina was my first show with Jason. And Jason was sitting on his bed across the room, and he was working on Fantastic Four archives. This was May or June of 2008. And I'm just waiting to go to dinner, and I'm drawing Scarlet Witch in my sketchbook with a ballpoint pen, a $1 Bic ballpoint pen. And, Jason and Donnie are talking, and we had met kind of in passing a couple times. I remember when Jason came to the store in 2006 when the first Rittenhouse Avengers set was
right. Complete Avengers 1963 to present.
Yes, and he was showing Donnie some of his cards, and I saw them, and it's just kind of like, oh, that's cool, but whatever. And then he goes, what are you doing? you're an artist? He knew I was an artist, but we had never seen each other's work. And so he's like, can I see? And I'm like, okay, here's my book. And he just kind of looks at it and he goes, why aren't you doing what I do? And I go, because I have no idea what you do. What even are those? And he tells me, he suggests that I do some samples, which I did because he said, look, I'm not supposed to know this, but I know this. The next set is X-Men Archives. And I know you love the X-Men. So he knew me enough to know that. And he says, I think you could do this. I think you could do what I do. And I think that you will be really well received. And there were some other things that he said that actually came true, which we'll talk about later. But he said, go to Hobby Lobby or whatever, or Joann's, or just go to an art store, get some blank trading cards, do about a dozen samples, and then pick like your favorite 4 or 5, and then email me. So we exchanged numbers before the weekend was over. I emailed him samples like a week later because I got right on it. I went and bought my first Copics.
How did you do a dozen? How many did you do?
I did like 2 dozen.
I knew it had to be at least double.
I did a lot, and you know, some of them had backgrounds, some of them didn't. Some of them were portraits, some of them were profiles, some of them were full body. And I sent him, I think I sent him 6, and he's like, these are amazing. And he forwarded them to the art director at Rittenhouse, and that was it. So it really was just a small series of events that kind of led to us being in that space together. And he was like, you have to do this. And it happened. So yeah, 2008 is when everything changed. And on December 4th, 2008, it was a Thursday, I got an email saying, we would like for you to be a part of our next project. And that was it.
Wow. I mean, and like, you know, just random kind of sequence. And again, things falling into place. Like, where were you at the time in terms of like your attitude and ambition towards an art career? Like that like, if that encounter didn't happen, where does Rhiannon Owens, the artist, like go from there?
If that encounter hadn't happened, I would probably still be working in bars and nightclubs, doing stand-up and hosting special events and you know, spearheading fundraisers, which I used to do. I would probably just be doodling and making clothes occasionally, or being paid once or twice a year to draw someone's 5-year-old daughter or something. If that first project would not have been X-Men centric, I don't know that I would have jumped at it, because on the drive home from that show, Donnie and Jason both, because we rode together in the same vehicle, really talked up like what doors this could open. Because Jason had talked about professionally as an artist, you know, he could charge a little bit more for his commissions, and it got him some more notoriety. So his ability to supplement his income, because he had small children and was married, you know, was important for him. I was single at the time. I wanted to be single. I had no children and I was not even thinking about kids. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could buy that expensive handbag I saw, you know, or I had a lot of friends who lived in other states. I was like, oh, maybe I could travel a little bit more, you know. For me, it was, I want to draw Storm. I want to draw the X-Men and say that I did an X-Men project. And, you know, that was me just kind of reliving my love as a child for that franchise. But if it had been anything else, I probably would have been like, I'll think about it. So, yeah.
And so, I mean, anytime we think about hypotheticals, especially now, it's. I mean, I'm a comic fan, so I was familiar with it, but like the multiverse and the what if, and so you got me picturing like this what if Jason Sobel got sick before WonderCon, and like it's just a picture of you, you know, like in a corner with a sewing machine making clothes.
That old, my mom's Japanese, so I say, you know, that old Asian lady squinting, like, oh, I make you dress, I'll be done in a minute. You know, beat it. Because I used to get those jokes. I mean, I don't look Asian. My mother's Japanese, but when I would sew and then I would embellish stuff, because I've got like little rhinestones on this, like people would give me crap. I'm like, oh, you're so Asian. You don't look Asian, but you're so Asian. I mean, I would get that stereotype. And yeah, absolutely. As an old lady, I would be sitting in a corner making a dress for some kid, my friend's kid's prom or something. I'll be done tomorrow. It'll be done. It's so pretty. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
So, I mean, we're talking about like your ambition at that point, and then suddenly, a couple months later, December, the wheels start turning in your head, and your ambition, and in terms of like where you want to take your artistic career, takes this 180. Like,
Oh, it did.
tell me about like. So Robert Colbus was the art director you mentioned at Rittenhouse Archives at the time. Now he's like vice president or something. But at the time he was the art director. Tell me about the conversation you had with him that led to you ultimately being a promoted featured artist on your first trading card set.
Okay. So the convention in Charlotte was in May or June. I didn't get this invite until December. And I had my samples done like a week after that show that summer. I mean, it was like just barely summer. And suddenly this entire nerd herd of mine was in my ear about, oh my God, you're going to do this and you could be doing this and this could lead to this. And what if you end up at San Diego and, you could do sequentials one day, right? Like the landslide of what literally multiverse what ifs just calm down. Like I haven't even heard anything. And after a month with no response, because I didn't get that invite until that fall. So a whole season, the whole summer had passed and I hadn't heard a word. And I remember asking Jason, I was like, so, hey, he's like, well, it's we're still doing Fantastic Fours. It's not been released yet. So it'll be after that. So just sit tight. So I talked to some other friends of mine and I said, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to commit to it because it's not something that I can just kind of dabble in and then sit, snub and walk away from. Like this could be a big deal. And when I finally did get that email from Robert at Rittenhouse, I cried. I was at the store, the shop, Gotham City Limits in Southside. It's now under new ownership, but Donnie was there. We were breaking down boxes because the shipment had come in the day before. And I was standing at the computer and I was checking my email. He was breaking down the box and he just looks over and there are tears streaming down. I wasn't making a sound, just tears. And he's like, what happened? Did someone die? Are you okay? And I said, I just got invited. I'm getting choked up. I was like, I just got invited to do X-Men Archives. Like, I'm going to do the thing. And he screams an expletive and drop kicks this box across the room. His girlfriend was there, nearly hit her in the face. So it was just this electricity in there. Like we were excited. But then I was scared to death because now I'm in. Now I'm invited. And to me, that was such a big deal. So now it was, okay, if you're going to do this, you can't suck. You are not allowed to suck at this. But I had no idea what I was in for because here I was again, that new kid in an environment where I wasn't special. There was a talented pool of people already doing this. There was nothing about me, at least I thought, that stood out because I was just a number in a pool doing the same content, maybe not the same way, but so I wrote Robert. I responded to his email very enthusiastically after I stopped crying and said, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for giving me a shot. I hope I make you proud. Here's my shipping info to send me the blanks, blah, blah, blah. And then about a week later, the cards hadn't shown up yet, or they had just gotten there maybe. I had wrote, I said, hey, I'm just letting you know the cards here. I counted them, the amount is right, blah, blah, blah. And then he responded, he's like, thanks for letting me know. Not everybody does that. And I was like, oh, yay, me, I'm professional. And then I wrote him back and I said, okay, so I have been talking to friends about this, Jason and other people. And I said, I know that you, as an artist, could end up in, an ad or have artwork on a box or something. And I'm like, I want to be that good one day. I want to get to a place where I can say I did that or I was picked for that. And I said, and I mean, I want to be in the ads. I want to be on the box. I want to be in this and I want to do that. And he wrote me back and he's like, well, there's no surefire way. We just, here at the office, we sit and we choose. And then, and I said, well, it's a goal of mine. And I hope one day I do something good enough for you to pick it.
One day.
One day. Well, that one day was a couple months later because yet again at Gotham City Limits, when I was working there in 2008, this is now 2009, the solicitation ads are coming out for X-Men Archives.
And you never find out from Rittenhouse.
They don't tell us. There was no warning. There was no, hey, so make sure you check out, the next issue. It was a surprise. It was like Christmas. It was like, ta-ta-ta. It was a Wednesday. The shipment had come in. I was there early before the shop opened, and I was putting the stuff out on the table, and I always went through Previews magazine because I was a bit of a collector. I had statues and busts and action figures, but I never ever, even at that point, paid attention to the trading card section, which is super tiny. And that very first page, because I'm looking for busts and statues and toys. That very first page was a full page ad for the X-Men Archives, and dead center, it didn't have one of my cards, it had two of them. And I lost my mind. I went and locked the door, turned the lights off, and literally crawled behind the counter and boo-hooed because I was like, there's no way. There's no way. And then I went straight to the computer and I emailed Robert. I'm like, oh my God, did you see this? Like an idiot. Like he's not the one that made it happen. And then I wrote him back and I'm like, I'm sorry, that was stupid. Of course you saw it. I said, thank you so much. And then it just kept happening. And it was just on that first set. So it wasn't just in the ad. That there was a Storm card, which I have, that I managed to get back from someone.
That's the one from the box.
It was on the box. And it was, I'm trying to not so there's no glare. Yeah, there it is. X-Men. The big.
And not just on that box that I'm holding, on every box.
It was on the box. It was on the solicitation ads. It was online on the solicitation ads in color and black and white. There were seven Marvel comics printed with colored and I bought every one of those issues just because. But then it was in magazine articles. Like it didn't stop there. And this was just the first project. And that particular card ended up being used over and over and over. And then Jason's like, hey, you like Wonder Woman and Batman. There's a DC project coming. Would you be interested in that? And I'm thinking this is a whole new arena. This is a whole new property. So I was like, okay. He's like, do some DC samples. And I said, okay. So I did another dozen or so. And he's like, let me know when you're done. Send them to me. And I was like, okay. So, well, who handles those? He goes, Rittenhouse. They have that license too. I'm going to send them to Robert and, blah, blah, blah. But DC had a bigger part than Marvel did. So it was a couple more people involved in deciding. And that after that card, DC happened. So straight out the gate, the first two properties I worked on was Marvel and DC.
So obviously, like a good deal of your success, you gotta like it's got to be credited to how that early work was showcased and pushed so hard.
Yeah.
And look, I want to make sure that you know that I know that this is my takeaway from your telling the story, and I want to make sure everybody else takes away from the story that like you know you didn't like you asked like what do I have to do one day, and
Yeah. There was no, hey, I'm this good, do this for me, or hey,
right.
it's what do I have to do to prove myself? What if anything are the steps to earning this privilege?
And that's so humble. That's so cool. Like that I just want to be better attitude. And obviously they didn't. It wasn't just the attitude that did it. Like it was the work. Like the work they thought was of a certain style that this is marketable. It's of a quality that it's consistent with the standards for what we hold our product to. So that's a big deal. And I mean, like, sorry, I feel like I'm asking like so many questions here, but like, did like the attention and the sense of achievement, like, because I know, like you said, your initial reaction, like stopping behind the counter, locked room or whatever, but like,
It's so dramatic.
Did that like get to your head? Did you have like this like I have arrived moment where like, yeah, I'm here now?
I was scared to death. I was scared to death because it didn't feel like I arrived. It suddenly felt like I was never allowed to suck ever again. If I'm going to be this recognizable this early on, if I'm going to do, like you said, to their standard, something that's worthy of solicitation and representing their brand, I cannot ever have an off day, which was so foreboding because I ended up having quite a few off days years later. And I was like, okay, I can't walk away from this now. I can't now go, thanks guys, appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for, getting my name out there. And I'm going to go sit on my butt for the rest of my life and just shove this one image in everyone's face and go, see what I did? It's $1,000. You have to pay me all of your money. Oh no. Adam Hughes is one of my favorite artists. And one of the things that I love about him as a person, watching him do his live demonstrations and having been able to spend a little bit of time with him interpersonally, whole other story. He does not ever, from what I gather in my time with him and hearing him speak about his own art, does not ever think, I'm Adam Hughes, I can wipe my ass on a piece of paper and just not have to try ever again. One of the things about him as an artist that I respect is the fact that he will look at his own work sometimes and go, that was an off day. And I think it is the best thing I've ever seen. Other than
That's how I feel when you poo-poo your stuff.
And other than the nuances that he, employs, his Art Nouveau and his sense of realism and, and even the humor that he imbues in his work, I'll look at something and think it's amazing, but he can look at it and tell you every flub, every mistake, every headache, every, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. And I can look at my work and do the same thing. Not to say that I'm on his level at all, but as an artist, I can't let myself get lazy. I can't let I can't let myself just think that, oh, I'm Rhiannon Owens. I don't have to do anything, because then that I'm not an artist anymore. Now I'm a diva. I'm spoiled, and I don't want to be those things because I have met those people and I don't like them. I don't want to be those people. So I felt a lot of pressure because there were also artists who had been doing doing cards for a couple of years who were mad. They were mad at me because my work got used, and they had been doing it for years and they had never been on a box. They had never been an ad. And it wasn't that I kissed anybody's butt or begged for it. I just said, what do I have to do? And Robert gave me that shot. And there are people to this day who still hold that against me.
And I could understand someone being upset about not getting the opportunity themselves, but to direct it at you seems, unfair, and just based on the way that you're describing it, like there's nothing, you didn't do anything wrong, but I also can appreciate, like any job work environment, like I've been here this long and I kind of get passed over.
Right.
I show up on time, I do what I'm told, I get my work in on time. So there's always going to be, any humans, it's natural to feel some type of way. And it's unfortunate that some people chose to direct it at you. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to learn about editing. So that's very interesting. That like the success didn't kind of like give you this momentum where you're like, I'm in cruise control. You took it and were able to like keep pushing yourself. Probably, like you said, it was stressful, but it probably made for good work. To the point where a few years later, it's 2012, right? Rittenhouse is doing a follow up to Women of Marvel, right? They did a 2008 Women of Marvel Series 1, as it would be known, and Series 2 now. And somewhere along the way, you go from being a sketch card artist to a printed artist.
Yeah. The key to everything that I have been able to do is I asked, what do I have to do? How do I make this happen? How can I do this or get here or be at this level or whatever? So rewinding back to 2008 real quick, at the show with Jason, where I first hear about sketch cards, I also meet Allison Sohn, who is now Mrs. Adam Hughes, but at the time was not. They were together, but they just weren't married yet. And she and Kat Staggs, who was also at the show, they were like the female sketch card artists. And I think there's a couple other names like Renee DeLiz, who at the time they were up there. And after having this conversation with Jason, I happened to be walking past Adam's table because I love his work. And I see Allison's book that has sketch cards in it. And so she also tells me about them. Well, in it, she had examples of her Women of Marvel cards, which had come out earlier that year. They were just, printed examples, not for sale. And so when we get to 2012, and I'm regularly getting the invites, I'm now in the pool of artists who gets the email saying, hey, this is our next project. This is when it's due. This is how much we need from you, yada, yada, yada. Women of Marvel. So I can draw all the girls. I love drawing only the girl. Like I hardly ever draw guy characters. So I remember back to Spider-Man Archives of 2009. And there were artists, Portraits and High, who did a subset where they painted and they were printed on cards that looked kind of like I had a canvas texture. And I remembered that. And I wrote Robert and I said, hey, so question. I remember back on Spider-Man Archives, we did this, or you guys did this. They were also doing sketch cards. Did they do extra because they did these? Or how did that work? Because that's a goal. I want Marvel to print my artwork. Or I want Marvel artwork printed, period. I still had no aspirations to be a sequential artist. I actually really enjoyed doing sketch cards at that point. I had been doing it for 4 years, almost 5 years. And I was like, this is, I think I found my niche. And Rob goes, all we have to do is come up with an idea, and then we at Rittenhouse will pitch it. And if Marvel's okay with it, then we move forward. And it's just the same art approval process. We just have to show them the images, and they yay or nay, and then back to the drawing board or not. And we have to do it on a schedule so it can be printed in time. And I was like, oh, okay. So moving forward, can because I'd really like to, and I had done some paintings that very few people had seen. And I sent it to him and I was like, so here's some paintings I've done. Because I was thinking about things like those old Boris and Julie Marvel Masterpieces cards I saw. And I wanted to do that. And he was like, oh, I didn't know you could paint. Put that in his memory cap for later. And he came back to me and he said, okay, so we're going to do a follow-up to Women of Marvel in 2013. Let's do a subset. We need 9 iconic females, and you and I will email back and forth until we figure out the 9, and then we'll come up with a theme or something. Oh, and by the way, you get to write the descriptions on the back of each card. I'm sorry, what? I'm not just going to do the artwork. You want me to write too? Like, crap. And it was just a matter of having a conversation with an art director who was open to ideas and who was willing to work with me and then supported my enthusiasm. He was Robert and Rittenhouse in general, Stephen, they were really great to work with. It felt like a family. It's a small it's a small company. It's not an office with, a bunch of corporate ladders and crap. It was just, a small business with maybe 4 or 5 people at the time. Robert being the sole art director, Stephen, being the president of the company. And it was just a matter of going, hey, so I had an idea. And they're like, you know what? We like that. Let's go with it. I felt appreciated and I felt encouraged and I felt like what I did for them meant something. So I wanted to do more. It was amazing.
So you make that 9-card set, and then, oh, by the way, you have to sign 100 of each of them to be randomly inserted. I think it was one per case.
That got added later. I didn't ask for that. It was just a thing. Like, oh, hey, later, and you're doing this thing. Let's throw in another, thing for people to collect. And they sent me a box with 100 copies of each card. And I had to sign them and send them back. And I signed them in a day. And then I didn't draw for 2 days because my hand hurt. And they're still selling. There was a set on eBay I saw last week that sold for $300, $200 or $300 for 9 cards. And I'm like, because I wrote on it. Like, even now to me, that still trips me out. And we're 10 years past that set now. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. And not only that, like a very short time after, they say, hey, want to do another 9? Same deal for Dangerous Divas Series 2. And you crush it. And the same thing with the autos, your poor little hand.
It was professionally, it was such a good time for me. Behind the scenes, my world was falling apart. And I look back at that work and that time and those projects. It is a shining example of even when your life feels like it is falling apart, you can still make magic happen. And those 18 cards really are something that I will look at. You can see behind me, that's the art for Ms. Marvel. It's only 5x7, but the original card art for that first project, it hangs on my wall. And there are days that I'm like, I cannot. And I'll look at that and I'm like, yes, you can. Get out of bed. Do it.
So, I mean, this, you talk about, professionally, and kind of differentiate. You did have, and I don't want you to have to, share them when you're comfortable with, but I mean, like, you had some things going on in your personal life, like your father passed away.
Yeah. So he wasn't my biological father, but the closest thing I'd had to since my parents' divorce. And it was the first time someone I was related to, someone I was close to, had died. Devastated me. I didn't draw for 3 months.
But I mean, and so do you think that, like, because you made a point to say that it was some of the best work you ever did. Do you think in some weird way, like, the external chaos feeds the work, or can, like, because I mean, just the timing of how you say, you know, like you're going through a lot through this year and a half, 2 years, and then like some of the best work of your life.
So, no, not entirely, because that particular work, I really had to harness what energy I could and not. I mean, I was literally drawing some of those cards just sobbing, and trying not to blow snot on the artwork. But that's not to say that there was a lot of stuff I did in that time for projects that I am not proud of. There were a number of things that I had agreed to do that I had to back out of because I just didn't have it in me. But those particular cards, you know, some people are like, well, of course you did it. It's Marvel. No, that's not why I did it. It was Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse gave me a shot,
Right.
promoted me, worked with me, and even on the Women of Marvel cards, I didn't just do that 9-card subset. I was doing box incentives now. So I was not just doing pack inserted sketch cards. I was doing the stuff that, like, if you want anything by her, you have to buy hundreds of dollars worth of product. And I had to take a break. There was 3 months I didn't draw, and that project was due. And Robert and Steven were amazing with me because I said, look, my daddy died. I can't even pull myself out of bed today. I know I have to get this done for you. What is the hard deadline? Because I'm trying to manage being fair to myself and trying not to fall apart every day, but I know I have to get this done. There were other projects where I had maybe agreed to do 10 or 15, and I was like, look, I'm really sorry. My life is falling apart. I feel like a piece of crap, but I have to back out of this. Some people were really great about it. Some people weren't. And there were projects that I didn't back out of that, looking back now, I'm like, I probably should have backed out of that too, because what they got was not my best.
Right.
This career, this now 4 or 5 year long career I had steamrolled into something. I stopped working at the comic store. I stopped entertaining. Art was now all I did. So I had to work. Because now this was how I paid my bills. This is how I fed myself. This is how I fed my cats. You know, this, and it was a hard place to be as a professional, picking and choosing. If I do these cards that's going to get printed and I get to keep the originals, that's art that will feed me for 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
I do these 10 cards for this company and maybe make $100. That'll pay my light bill next month.
And if I do it all, I'm not going to be able to prioritize self-care.
Well, and I didn't even know self-care wasn't even a thing for me back then. My boundaries were horrible. I hardly ever said no. And keep in mind, I was also in panic survival mode because there was a lot of other stuff going on. So I was like, well, I have to pay my bills and I have to eat, and I've got a convention next month. So I got to get a plane ticket, and I've got to, you know, pay for my part of the hotel room with my friends. And I have to, you know, I need more Copic refills and more markers. And I'm running out of sketch paper because I'm doing all these. In those moments, in those panicky moments, I had to decide on the fly what was best for me, what would work best for me, and what would help me get to the next month. Because at that point, I was so depressed, I was so upset, I was so devastated. I was losing friends left and right from all kinds of things. And then, you know, the biggest thing being my daddy died. I didn't know I was going to get to that next. It was surviving day to day was a struggle. I wasn't sleeping. I was not eating properly. Like, it was bad. It was really bad. And it was a really difficult period. But, you know, here are these 9 cards, and then here's another 9. And it's like, you know, even in the midst of all this chaos, yay, Rhiannon Owens.
Yeah. No, I mean, and look, that's a main part of the reason for this is because all people see is the work, and there's a story, and whether it's a happy story, like a journey, you know, like nothing's perfect. There's struggles, you know, and I always say like as individuals, we tend to compare our behind the scenes to other people's highlight reels.
Right.
You know, because there's what we let other people see and what's none of their business. But I mean, like, I think it's important for people to know that that it wasn't just, like all these amazing things happened and I was successful. No, all these not so amazing things happened too. And I'm still effing here.
Yeah, and I can say that now, but in the middle of it, nobody
Right.
wanted that. Nobody.
Sure.
Because I had created such a vehicle and such a body of work, even at that point, that they didn't care what was going on as long as I did the work. And listen, I'm still playing catch up with some of those things from back then, and I'm not proud of that at all. But I've also learned how to say no and how to prioritize self care. So the decisions I'm making now and have made since I've moved out of Florida have vastly improved the quality of work that I do compared to, oh, I have to pay this bill next month. Let me just, pull this out of thin air and you get what you get. Um, there are people who get it. I have some amazing fans that have been with me since I think 2012. One guy in particular whose name is Keith, who has commissioned me time and time again, not even a card collector. His mother was an artist and he goes, "You know what? I get it. Some days you just don't have it in you. Some days you are just tapped out and that energy isn't there. I get that. I want beauty from you. I don't want a half-ass job or a rush job or that's okay job." He goes, "So I'm happy to wait. Just communicate with me." There are some people who are like, "Hey, it's been 2 minutes. Have you done my AP yet? Is it approved?"
Right.
It's the nature of the job. Some people get it, some people don't.
Right. So, I mean, compared to the first, 5 years, the last 8, I feel like, kind of, humdrum. There's been some big changes
Yeah.
in the industry. So 2014, up until this point, up until 2014, Upper Deck and Rittenhouse had been sharing the property. They kind of co-licensed it together. They were both allowed to make Marvel trading cards. 2014, Upper Deck assumes control, but you're able to still, like you have this body of work. So it's like, and you were already working for Upper Deck since 2012 beginnings,
Correct.
right? So you were kind of already with them, but now it's a little bit of a dynamic change because now you're with you started with Rittenhouse, you have this relationship with them, and then obviously Upper Deck is a bigger, they do lots of different things. They produce a lot more product, and now they're your only source. So it's like familiarizing with contacts and stuff, and I imagine it was a little bit of a challenge to like, because like you said, I was used to this for so long, and you had this emotional connection with it now because of the opportunities and everything, but you're still able to this day, and I know there's things you're working on. You haven't, if Upper Deck's watching, she hasn't showed me, but I know that she is working on things for Upper Deck still. Four sets.
There's
Four.
3 on my table, 2
Yeah.
on my right, and there's 1 on the way.
So there is, plenty more Rhiannon Owens coming our way, and it's just a little, just on a different brand than for the first couple of years. But
Yeah.
but no, I think that, like, everything about your professional journey is incredible. It's inspiring. I think someone that wants to be an artist, I think someone that wants to do what they want to do can listen to your story and do a better job of chasing their goal. So I hope that people take that away, because and I know I keep trying to, like, get you to admit, something's incredible or whatever, but like it's very common for people to give up on things.
And I almost did a couple times.
But the fact is that you didn't, and you're a professional at this, and it's like I said, I don't want to beat it to death. I'm sure it's a dream come true for you, since from being the little girl reading comics reading X-Men 225 and copying panels and going through your father's sketchbook. I mean, like, what a fairy tale, right? For you to be here.
It very much was, which is part of why, despite some things, I didn't want to just go, okay, well, this is where I die, or this is where this ends. I mentioned earlier, I could be really stubborn. And some of it was me going, this can't be it. This can't be how I go out. And there were some people who were really great with working with me. Again, Robert and Steven being some of those people. And then there were some people who were like, well, I don't have anything for you. If you can't come through for me, well, then my door is closed to you. And I had to accept that. And that was fine, because the reality for me at the time was they weren't the only people paying me to work for them.
Right.
So options.
You've worked on how many different for how many different companies on how many different properties?
Okay. To date, as of literally this last weekend, because I just started a new project for a new company, I have done work or worked for a total of 27 different companies, 5 different countries: China, UK, Greece, Canada, and America, US. I have Marvel being the bulk of the work I've done. At one point, DC, even after Cryptozoic got the license. Star Wars was the third, in 2009, was the third property that I got to work for. And then I've done, smaller, lesser known things like, well, not lesser known, but Voltron, Red Sonja, Vampirella. And then Mars Attacks is a thing. I just did a 10-card subset for them last year, which was the first multiple printed work.
And I've seen them. Those are fun cards. It's such a cult classic movie, but
my boyfriend thinks that they're the best thing that I've ever drawn ever. Like, he loves them. And it was comfort zone, and drawing, different. I had to draw national monuments, so I had to draw environments and scale and perspective and full scenes and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So you're kind of going into my next thing that I wanted to talk about, coincidentally, is I kind of wanted to go under the hood a little bit. And, we know everybody's just heard the story, right? But there's still this whole other level that we kind of mentioned throughout, and it's the actual you doing the work.
Yeah.
And everybody's, I believe that everybody's process is unique, just in the sense that no two people are going to make the same brush strokes. But in terms of how you approach things, it's unique. And I was wondering if you if I dumb down, and I say dumb down because I'm not artistically inclined, the process of creating something into these little buckets. Could you kind of take us through? And if I'm making it, if I don't know what I'm talking about, if I'm out of my element, stop me. But I feel like there's the creative part, everything before you kind of even touch a piece of paper, and then there's references if you're drawing figures, if you're using photos or little action figures, or you're just going from memory, and then kind of the layout. I don't know if you do rough drafts or if you just kind of go right on there, and then the coloring, which is where you really bring it to life.
Oh, my markers. So I don't really have a specific process. There are a lot of people who will tell you that they have to come up with an idea, collect reference, do a rough draft. Sometimes they do a color draft before anything gets laid on the actual card or artwork. They've, reworked it or played around with it, tried it out. I think in the last 5 years, I've maybe done 24 rough drafts, and 10 of those were for the Mars Attacks cards because my art director said, I need to see what you're going to do before you do it. And when I tell you that my rough drafts are so basic, it's literally just some graphite pens. I've literally drawn stick figures as a rough draft, and I don't color draft anything. When I get a project and I look at what they're asking of me and I'm looking at my schedule, I'm immediately negotiating with myself. Can I do a full figure and backgrounds for each of these? Do I have to half it and do portraits and more simplistic things so that those full figures and backgrounds are more rare and then therefore more collectible? Can I even do that? Are they all going to be Spider-Man with big white eyes and just a single color hood from his shoulders up and a color wash in the background because that's all the time I have? And again, you mentioned this a moment ago about not everyone sees what goes on behind the scenes, and so they just get the artwork in their hand and that's it for them. For any one of us that does this and does as much of it as some of us do, we have to negotiate. Do I want to sleep that day? Do I have a birthday party I need to say no to again because I'm still working? Oh, it's my anniversary. Maybe I need to save that day and spend it with my significant other if I have one. And it's
right. And real quick, to clarify for anybody who's unsure, you've done to date thousands of sketch cards.
Since 2008, when I got, this was one of the, ready? This is the first sketch card I ever did for Rittenhouse in December of 2008.
Right.
This, the first one professionally. Since this card, this is number one, I have done roughly 7,000 cards. That is not including pinups, artist proofs, prelims, printed cards, sketches in sketchbooks, or sketches at conventions. So, there's a lot that I have to figure out. So I don't prelim anything, and not to toot my own horn at all, but I've drawn some of these characters enough that I don't have to prelim them. Like I'm not going to draw Storm punching, through a wall because that's not her power set. So when I draw her, I think about, okay, there's snow, there's lightning, there's wind, there's tornadoes, there's whatever. How many times have I drawn it and how can I draw it differently? But, she's not going to look clumsy. She's very elegant. She's very regal. So her poses and her stances are going to be that. I've drawn it enough that I feel like I could draw her in my sleep and everyone knows that she's my favorite. Whereas someone like the Rhino from Spider-Man, he's a big, heavy guy. So he's a powerhouse. He can run through a wall or whatever. So his stances are more aggressive. But I don't always have time to draw this 7-foot character from head to toe on a 2.5 by 3.5 inch space. So then it's about facial expression, or it's about little tiny chunks of debris flying past his face so that you get he's punching something or destroying something and you see it here, but you don't see all of it because I don't have 3 hours that day to devote to one card. And there are some people who will say, well, then why do you take on so much work? Because this is what I do. This is all I do. And I work for a lot of people. And I'm not going to edit that so that I can draw a 8-hour masterpiece every single time I draw a card. Because here's another thing I think about, right? Secondary market. If every single card I drew was a masterpiece, even a masterpiece next to a masterpiece, you'll still see one that's better than the other, or someone will like something about this one more than this one. I'm thinking about, okay, these companies want me to draw this much, and this is what I do for a living. I've dedicated myself to it at this point. So I'm going to draw faces for people who like faces. I'm going to draw some portraits and some faces because that's all I have the time for. But Marvel Masterpieces 2020, I made a point to do more full figure, more environments, more scenes, more backgrounds, not just because of the nature of that project, but because we were all in the middle of COVID lockdown and it just happened and I was glued to my table for 3 months. And I don't want people to have to spend $400 for every one of my sketch cards if they can get a portrait card for $50 on eBay. Because I want everybody to be able to enjoy what I do. I don't only want people with deep pockets to be able to go, oh, well, I have one of her 25 from last year that she did. If I do 400 cards this year and only 200 of them are released because, some of them never see the light of day for whatever.
Right.
That's 200 people with 200 different budgets who have 200 chances to find something at their price point that they are satisfied with. There was a collector recently who commissioned me for an artist proof and just simply asked me to recreate a portrait I did in 2010 that is so simple, but it is the world to him. He thought it's the most beautiful thing. And I can't tell him he's wrong. So there's something for everybody. And I try to incorporate that in what I'm doing. But I don't always have time to figure that whole
Right.
I have used physical reference like models and live people when Tony and Elaine first started Perna Studios and they did Classic Mythology, the first series. Every one of the people in those photos is a model, all those gods and goddesses. And I did that on purpose because I had been doing comic art since then. I hadn't really tackled realism outside of Star Wars. So that was a chance to kind of really go back to those art school roots and whatnot. But I've drawn so many cards at this point, I don't always have to look at reference. Sometimes I do, just because I want the musculature to look decent.
It sounds like you're able to kind of streamline the process. But at the same time, it doesn't. It feels like you're not saving as much time as you would think because of all the mental energy that goes into like the creative side. Like, how many times have I done this? How am I going to do this different? And after 7,000, and as that number goes up, it's only going to get even harder.
Well, and think about too. Marvel hasn't stopped creating new characters.
Right.
So when Marvel Masterpieces came out, Psylocke had become Captain Britain again, so she was in a new outfit. So then there's going to the internet and hunting down reference images of costumes that were allowed or whatever. And then also, they keep tweaking the rules. As long as that license belongs to Disney, it has to be very kid friendly.
Yeah.
I first started, we were drawing, 3-foot deep cleavage lines and big old bubble butts. We can't do that anymore. We can't draw Wolverine and Thing with their stogies. We can't draw excessive blood or gore. I literally had to rework the background of a card of X-23 that was just a color splash because it looked too much like blood coming down the wall. And that's not okay. So even
I get it. And if that's the trade-off for like the quality we've gotten on the cinematic side, I think I'm going to live with it.
I mean, those movies really, I think, opened up our nerd world to a lot of people. And I do think that there are a lot more collectors in part because of that.
Yeah, they have the exposure to the characters for sure.
Yes. And you'll always have that divide between people who have collected their whole life and people who only collected since the first Iron Man movie came out in 2008.
Right. When it was cool.
Right. We're in vogue now, so it's okay to be a nerdy. And now you're one of us because you went and saw, Robert Downey Jr., fly through the air. Good for you. And there are people who, they're only interested in the characters they've seen in film. They don't know about Madame Mask, or they don't know about, the original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants because they didn't know Scarlet Witch used to be a bad guy or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're getting to, based on what you said, you're able to kind of the characters in your head, you know how to draw them. I want to talk about the coloring.
Okay.
Because there's so many different ways to color, and that's something that fascinates me as a art dummy. You use Copic markers, right? Mm-hmm. And you showed me before we started like your extensive Copic marker collection.
It's ridiculous.
So you don't have to. So this is kind of what they look like. And could you just? I mean, you don't have to do a symposium, but to me, they look like the same markers in my regular box of Crayola. And obviously, there's something different between them and this because you, as an artist, you live by them. So
literally, I just grabbed one. They're right here.
Give the uninitiated just a 1-minute crash course in what makes a Copic marker great.
Okay, So you have a brush tip, you have a chisel tip. These are sketch markers. Now they have other ones that have different kinds of tips. The range of values and colors that these come in is extensive. What's really great, in my opinion, is they're alcohol based and they blend like watercolor. So when you think of, magic markers, you think streaky lines or just block colors and flat surfaces. These cards or these markers, you're really able to do stuff like this, where you get this really subtle gradation. Her face is white, but there's probably 20 markers in her face.
Wow.
They're refillable. If the nibs get damaged or if you happen to let the marker dry out, the nibs are replaceable. So you can get miles and miles and miles out of one marker. Now, they're not cheap. When I started, they were $5 and some change. They're now $8 a piece.
And you have several hundred.
Yes. But I didn't buy them all at once. Funny story about them is when I first spoke with Jason and he said do some samples, I went out and bought my first markers. My first pinup of Dark Phoenix, all I had were 3 shades of red, 2 shades of gold, 1 or 2 flesh colors, and then some gray markers. That was it. And now I have 500 or 600 markers. Now I have some duplicates because I do burn through some colors faster than I can replace or get refills for. But when I travel to conventions, one carry-on bag, literal luggage pull behind me on wheels, is a case of markers and then some extras. To me, it's like drawing with watercolor, but they dry immediately. Depending on how much you saturate the surface, the range of values you get is ridiculous. And even the effects that you can make with them. Because it's like watercolor, if you use lighter shades over darker shades, you can lift some of that ink or that pigment back out so you can create certain effects with that. And you can color certain areas, especially cards because they're so small, really quickly. So for me, they also lend themselves to being timely. You can just
productive, yeah.
Yeah. I love them so much. I love markers. People don't. Some people don't like them. Some people prefer to paint or use colored pencil, and some people will poo-poo on them because they're not archival. If you leave that pigment in direct sunlight, it will fade over time. But most of the card artists that I know keep their cards in binders tucked away like they're precious in a dark corner in their offices or whatever. So that's not really an issue for them.
Yeah. I don't have any, somebody showed me a sketch card from X-Men Archives where the guy actually put mustard and pea or whatever in mixed them with the pigment before he put like a lacquer on it. So how people color things, like I have no, you get it done, in my opinion.
I actually know the card you're talking about, and I know the artist because I remember when he posted that, and we were all like, "You did what?"
That's ridiculous. And he put the ingredients on the back. It's wild.
He did. He painted with he had to do a lot of cards really quickly, and he just didn't have the time to go get more refills and keep sinking money into something that he wasn't paid for yet. And he, as an artist, got creative, and it worked. It was beautiful.
So. In like doing research for this, and obviously, being aware of you as an artist prior to this interview, I've seen your work, I've seen your style, and from talking to you a little bit, you've made it a point. Like you put this. Well, let me back it up, because the world of superheroes, right? Like it's been around for a long time, like close to a century. And obviously the world is a different place now than it was then.
Right.
I don't think it's conspiracy theory to say that like the industry was for a long time like a boys' club where boys wrote it, boys drew it, boys collected it. There were boy heroes, there were boy villains, and like girls were just kind of off to the side. And that's consistent with where we were as a society, and not defending or condoning, but just saying that like it is what it is. So over the last 30 years, I'd say specifically, a lot has been done in the way of inclusion, right? In terms of artists, writers, characters, that are female, as well as like members of the LGBTQ community. And so, looking at your work and talking with you, when you put this responsibility on yourself, like you don't just draw women, you don't just draw women well, you draw strong women, right? And so, in addition to being a woman, I consider you an authority on the subject. This is kind of like my long-winded preface for me telling you this, upsetting story, which is probably a bad way to preface that. A couple months ago, I was talking with a woman, a comic collector, and she was telling me a story about how she was at a comic convention. She's waiting in line to get a comic book signed by Mark Bagley, and guy behind her in line snickers and says, "Are you holding the spot in line for your boyfriend?" And this woman, like I've known her for a while, like she is a comic collector through and through, can tell you issue numbers, character first appearances, just as much as me or anybody else I know. So I hear something like that, and it makes me feel like we still have a long way to go. I believe in my heart, because I know what I am and I know the people I surround myself with, that experience, that attitude is the minority, right? But the effect is still there, right? It still happened, and it's still upsetting, and it still made this friend of mine not want to publicize her fandom, right? She kind of keeps it to herself. She kind of just, collects in silence. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on like, what can I do? What can men do who want to exist in a hobby that's inclusive and welcoming for everyone, do to show women that there's safe spaces for them as fans? That they don't have to sit alone if they don't want to. If they want to, fine. But that they can fan without fear of someone trying to diminish or belittle them.
So we could do a whole other interview just on that. So I will try to be as brief as possible.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I watched a documentary 2 nights ago about Chris Claremont and his run on the X-Men. And in this documentary, he talked about when he took over, he made a point to include more female X-Men and not make it or not allow it just be a boys' club. And at the time, behind the scenes at the offices, he was working with Ann Nesenti and Louise Simonson, the artist Walt Simonson's now wife, who at the time was Louise Jones, I think it was, who were editing and writing, and sometimes, doing art behind the scenes or inking or whatever. If you want to create an environment that is more inclusive, the first thing to remember is don't make it all about you, because you may think differently, you may behave differently, or you may not like the same things someone else likes. So the other thing is, don't make it about you, but don't yuck their yum either. If they like Thing, or if they like some obscure cosmic character that was only ever in 3 issues before they died, let them have it. It doesn't stop you from liking what you like. It doesn't invalidate what you like or what you know about what you like. So just let them have that thing. And the other thing is, to be fair, there are some people who have a very singular vision about how things should be. And they work very hard to have that vision be all there is in their own little pocket world that they live in. We call that gatekeeping, because they don't want anyone else to come into their boys club or their X-Men fan club or their Avengers fan club and talk badly about the thing that they like. So they create an environment where nobody wants to, because if they do, then they're made to be uncomfortable, or they're shot down, or they're belittled, or they're spoken to or treated in a way that, tells them you don't belong here. You can't be in this space. I have done women in comics panels. I have done LGBTQ panels at conventions. And I have had mothers with their young daughters come to my table and say, it's really good to see a female artist who doesn't draw every woman like a hooker or a stripper or with a broken back and giant triple D, breasts. What does my daughter need to know? Or what can my daughter do? Because she wants to do what you do. And I will just say, well, challenge yourself, draw things you don't like, because you're going to have to draw everything at some point: cars, perspective, plants, animals. And don't let other people tell you can't do it. Speaking to the whole point of the question, what can I do as a man, make this more open and inclusive? Just don't make it all about you, and just don't make it all about your singular perspective. You love the High Evolutionary. There are people who don't even know who that character is, and they'll look at you. No one knows who that is. Why would you like that character? Why does there have to be a justification for it? Why does there have to be some monumental reason for him to be your favorite character? I'm a half Asian, half white girl who loves Storm. She's black. Why would you like a black character? I've had people literally go, why is your favorite character black? Why can't she be? Is my question. Our society, whether we are aware of it or not, is a melting pot of sexual preferences, gender expression and identities, age groups, nationalities. We may like one thing or a handful of things because we identify with it, but that's what works for us. That doesn't work for everybody. And I think we're all at least hopefully mature enough to understand that this world that we live in, even comics and pop culture, it's not just about us and not just about our demographic or not just about our age range or our, income bracket or whatever. So it's really ridiculous to assume that these other things can't exist or shouldn't because they don't particularly click with us. I feel that that's really selfish. I feel that that's super narrow-minded. It's kind of steeped in bigotry and sometimes racism, ugly words, but that's a thing. And a really important point is you can respect someone else's thing, right? I love the X-Men, you love the High Evolutionary. I don't know a lot about the High Evolutionary, but I can respect that he's your favorite and let you have that. And it doesn't change that Storm is my girl. It doesn't change that I love the X-Men. We don't have to agree 100% to respect each other. And sometimes respect is just giving someone space to live in their world, in their bubble, and have their thing without trying to diminish it or take away from it or disrespect it or poo-poo on it. We love to say poo-poo. And it's really that simple. Some people just can't not be right. So they have to be better or bigger or more of a big deal. And so they diminish and crap on other stuff because that's how they make themselves feel okay. So if you want to make space for other things, just remove yourself from that arena and don't bother with it. You go have your thing over here. You let them have their thing over there. You don't even have to cross paths. Your worlds never have to collide. And you will both go on living. It will be okay. Someone will write a story or an artist will do a pinup or a page of your character and they'll get the attention you think they deserve. But, in this other book, in this other reality universe, whatever, that person will get their thing too. It's not going to change if you just leave them alone with it. It's so simple. It's so simple.
No, and that's an incredible point, and I think that not only applies to that's a universal attitude that we should have. Not just of someone who's different than me, like who's a different gender or race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or religion or anything like that, because I think the upsetting reality is, the frightening reality is that people of people that are different are going to observe that interaction between two people that are the same, and they're going to say, "Oh man, these two 35-year-old white men are trying to humiliate each other. What hope do I have of being included if they're doing it to each other?" And it's going to be it could potentially be double for me because they perceive me as different. And
Yeah.
so
So
you're right. That could be a whole other talk.
outside of this, world sketch cards, art, comics, I was the president of an ally support group, which was a local chapter of an international organization. And our whole thing was to teach people how to just be okay with each other, or how to support someone if they wanted to learn how to do that. And, one of the biggest challenges was always, well, my child is different. How are they going to live? Well, you have to ask yourself why you think they wouldn't, first of all. And again, remove yourself from the equation, because you are projecting all of your hopes, ideologies, fears, expectations onto a situation that largely has nothing to do with you. And it's the same thing here. That guy that, you hold the place for your boyfriend, that's super confrontational. Not only is it condescending, but it also diminishes, or tries to, her actual love for something. And who is anyone to take that away from someone else? Because, for people who are huge Batman fans and go, oh, he's just the DC's poor man, Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, because he's got money, he's a rich kid with issues, and so he can build whatever he wants. He doesn't have a superpower, it's a credit card. But that doesn't immediately erase his 80 years of history. He's the second longest running DC character, right behind Superman, coming in 1939. But some people don't agree that he's a superhero because he's just a rich kid. Why does it matter? Someone sat down and created that, and it resonated with enough people for this long. Let them have it. Go like what you like. It doesn't take anything away from that other person to let them have it, or you. And all you do is you lose time in the day worrying about this, trying to be right, when you could just be appreciating what you have and let them appreciate what they have.
I think a bigger level of awareness of how insidious the behavior is, will go a long way, because it's when you strip it down, it's I like this, you like that. If I put down what you like, I get to feel better about what I like. I get to feel validated, right? And so that's any difference. It doesn't have to be character. It could be anything. It could be favorite food or whatever. And so, like I said, I think the only thing we can do is awareness, because it's so rampant that people are always gonna have that urge to defend what they like by way of putting down what you like.
Well, and you make a really good point about awareness, because another point I was going to add quickly was, genuinely some people just are not exposed to certain demographics of people, gender expression, sexual preferences, whatever. And the small pockets they exist in are very closed off. So of course they don't know how to react or respond to something that's new, because it is completely foreign to them. Someone who grows up in some cornfield small town in Midwest America doesn't understand, rampant gun violence and race wars and things like that, because their community is all basically the same people, the same color skin, from the same families that grew up in the same area, and they all live and exist together. So, stories that talk about drug abuse, or, high rates of crime, or pulling yourself up out of a hole and making good, that will resonate with these people who have that experience or that exposure. Whereas Superman, who is this alien who is raised in cornfields in some small town out in Midwest America with these very white bread American ideologies, that's going to resonate with them. One doesn't diminish or dismiss or negate the other.
Right.
Same thing, and women becoming a bigger part of society or communities in general, single motherhood, being breadwinners. You know, why can't a woman be as powerful as a guy character or whatever? And bless her heart, she just passed away. But Betty White used to say, like, you know, it really makes me laugh when people refer to a woman's genitalia as someone being weak. Like, if you kick a guy in between the legs, those things are tender. He's going to fall to the ground. But women can have babies and they stretch right back in place and they go about their day. I mean, it's a person. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
and to your point, it's been said publicly that the most powerful character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Carol Danvers. So,
well, it's been kind of hinted at. Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique character said it in the last Fox X-Men movie. You should think about calling this the X-Women, because the last time I looked around, it was all saving the guys, butts, or, the most powerful X-Men are women. And then, Carol Danvers going toe-to-toe with Thanos and making him nervous, or Scarlet Witch.
Right. I don't see how Carol's, whatever. I don't want to get into
another episode.
Yeah, nerding out. Seriously, we've got so many spin-offs here. So bring it back to center. We were talking about, basically the subject of fans. Yes. And we've talked throughout the evening, good Lord, that you are also a fan. You've been a fan of the fiction, of the characters. But as far as the art, like, you obviously, whether it's through the trading card world or like through social media, just the internet, like you get exposed to other artists. And so I mean, we talked about, and you mentioned some artists that kind of stand out to you right now in terms of the work they're doing, and it grabbed your eye, and I like that. So I'd like you to talk about them. The first one is Don.
We've never met face to face. We have communicated a couple times via social media. The thing that I love about his work is that it is instantly recognizable as his. It's super colorful and vibrant, but it still has that black ink comic edge to it. And he followed me, which I can only guess is because he knew my name from cards. I didn't even know he did cards at the time until he started posting them on his social media, and someone mentioned him in one of the sketch card groups. But we've actually exchanged a few messages via Twitter, and he's just a really nice guy. He has complimented me on my work. I've complimented him on his work. And as an artist, when you do something that is so similar, even if you have your own style or your own niche, and you can look at someone's work and go, hey, buddy, that's really great. That's important. That's visibility. That's acknowledgement. Sometimes that encouragement means the world to someone who could be having a bad day or feeling down about themselves. I just love not only the level of just vibrant color and color mixing that he does. He's done some in progress videos where you can see how many markers he'll use. Scroll back down just a little bit. That the agent Antivenom in the middle there on the Fantastic Four cover.
Oh,
nope, you went past it. There it is, right there. No, go. You're going too fast. And a little bit more. And a little bit more. That Fantastic Four cover right there in the center. It's a white costume, but look at all the purples and the grays and the blues and the pinks in that. As someone who uses markers and layers color like I do, I respect and appreciate his level of attention to that kind of detail. Like, his costume's white, but it ain't white on that paper. It's all the colors, but it's still white. So I love his work for a lot of reasons. And having spoken to him briefly here and there, like, he's also a really nice guy.
Yeah, so that's Art of Idan, ARTOFIDAN on Instagram. Check him out. He's recommended by Rhiannon Owens. That's a seal of approval. And the next one,
Matt Applegate. He's another artist that I wasn't aware he did cards until I saw him in one of the sketch card groups on Facebook. What I love about him is his level of realness, his photorealism, which is something that I like to employ in some of the art I do. So there's that respect there. And again, he's doing this on 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and nailing a likeness is not easy, especially when you have to squish it down so small. And look at his work. It's not just marker. It's not just black and white. It's not just full color. There's, that Cyclops in the middle, which I believe
Jim Lee, yeah.
it's an homage to Jim Lee. It's just, I like photorealism. It's a kind of art that I personally kind of gravitate towards. And look at it. That's art. Look at all the wrinkles in that guy's face. Look at all the singular hairs that you can differentiate in his goatee. That's not easy to do, let alone shrink down so small. And
right. And he did it. He's showing you right here. He did it.
Yeah. I don't think Matt and I have ever, other than maybe in passing, commented on something together. But again, here's somebody that just on social media, we follow each other, and when we see each other's work, it's like click. I see his name, algorithms and all of that. I see his name pop up regularly when I post stuff on Instagram, especially, at Matt Applegate Draws, liked your photo. And that's just like, I really appreciate that. When an artist can build another artist up, even with just a single like, that kind of support, that's part of what made this community so great when I first came in, was we were doing that. We were all on each other's side. We were all building each other up. We were all trying to, hey, good for you. I'm so glad that you got on that box, or I'm so glad that you are on this project, or hey, let's do a jam card because I think our styles will mix really well. Yeah.
So again, that's Matt Applegate Draws, all one on Instagram. Yeah. I'm sure they are grateful for, your, approval, confidence, admiration. That's what it is. Yeah.
Here's what's hilarious. Like, their number of followers on social media is like 4 or 5 a billion. Art of a Dawn, 80,000. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, I just genuinely like what they produce.
Yeah.
And other artists, Andre Ausch, Dre Studios. Again, it's not just that he's a great artist. He's a nice guy. I made a post in one of the Facebook groups. I'm
going to have to disagree on that, only because he was on the show last week.
He posted on something that I kind of reminisced on, and he just came in, and I can't repeat it because it had some colorful language attached to it, just for emphasis. But it was probably one of the nicest things that anyone has said to me in a long time. And he and I barely know each other other than just casually interacting online. And that artist support between artists is everything for some people. That's community. We are a niche community. I mean, even if you think about nerd fandom, sketch cards and trading cards, we are at the bottom of the totem pole. I go to conventions and people go, oh, they still do that? Oh, that's still a thing? What's your real job?
Yeah. I mean, some of us have tried to put the number at where it's at, and it can't be more than 10,000 in the world. And that's a high number as far as, sketch card collectors.
I would be surprised if it's even that high.
Right. That's a high.
People come and go all the time.
Yeah.
Today, there was a collector that posted that he got a jam card from another collector that I had done with Axbone in 2014 on Marvel Universe, the second one. And I was like, I'm just really glad to see you're still in it. Like, it's just nice to see your name. And he goes, yep, I'm still here. I'm not as active as I used to be, but I still love your work. And this card has found a forever home. Thank you and Axe for doing something so beautiful. Made my day.
That's great. Yeah. So now, we talked about, your fans, and hopefully, I don't see why not. There's going to be some new Rhiannon Owens fans that maybe don't know you're still working for Upper Deck, other properties, so you can find pack inserted Rhiannon Owens cards. But as far as commissions, if somebody doesn't want to have to roll the dice and says, I want Rhiannon to do this.
Yeah.
Aside from sketch cards, because obviously when you have APs, you'll do sketch card APs. Well, what are there other sizes that you'll take commissions on?
So I will do when time permits, and that's hard to find sometimes. 5x7s, 9x12s, or 11x14s. 9x12s are more common because they're it's just people. 5x7s are really when someone like wants something badly but they don't want to spend too much, and then 11x14s obviously are more complicated because they're bigger and they're a little more time consuming. But those are kind of like the three go-tos. I do have blank sketch cards for PSCs, but those are usually for people who like specifically only collect card art.
Right.
So yeah, 5x7, 9x12, or 11x14. Those
okay. And so currently, like right now, are you like backed up with commissions?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm backed up is because as an artist who doesn't get a paycheck every week or every other week, I have to constantly accept work in order to be able to pay my bills. And just as, a little aside, like I'm waiting to get paid for 4 projects from last year, the last of which was turned in November. So I essentially live in debt to people for art. And the downside to that is if I get a cold and I'm out of commission for a week, that's even more time that I've lost. And so it's rare that I'm open, and right now I'm not. But that doesn't mean, like my friend Keith, who has commissioned me years in a row, I understand the process. I know it's not immediate. I really want you to tackle this character because I love your work. He has like 3 dozen 9x12s by himself. It doesn't even collect cards. And he's just like, here's the idea, run with it. Let me know if you need any reference or any other ideas. I'll see you when I see you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So in terms of if someone was to approach you today with a commission, they had the idea, you're like, yeah, I could do that. What kind of time frame? Obviously, nobody's taking you to court. Could they expect? And obviously, I know there's a whole other side to it with APs because they have to go to Upper Deck for approval, and that's out of your hands. But I mean, like, what's your what could they expect in terms of like getting it back?
So it really depends on what they ask for. You have people who will want edge to edge, so an entire background and all of that. Or you have people who just like just a standard pinup with maybe some colors or some glowy power things or some rubble or whatever. It really depends on the character and what all they ask for. If they just want, something simplistic, like let's just say Havoc, that old 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s costume where it was just flat black and he had some metal stuff.
Yeah.
That could be done in a day, easily. But, then you get someone who's like, well, I really like the Sentinels, so I want Master Mold in the background with a fleet of Sentinels flying over them, coming at you with like bombs and lasers and things. And I'm like, okay, you're going to be waiting a while.
That sounds cool, though.
It does, but even then, then I have to go, okay, well, here's the part you're not going to like. This is what I'm doing. This is what's coming up. So this is maybe when I can get to it. If you're willing to wait, or if you're okay with that, then yeah, we can do this. Otherwise, come find me in 3 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And I try to be as transparent. And I will say this. In 2008, when I first started, nobody asked, how long is this going to take? And that's an actual common question now. Can you give me an idea of what your turnaround time is? Anyone who is a collector of art needs to use that question as often as possible, because if you do not clearly communicate with an artist and say, well, I need it for a birthday by this day, or it's a gift for this holiday, or, whatever. If you say, take all the time you need, and then 2 days later you're trying to hammer us to the wall because you're waiting too long, that's not going
Right. Right. And so, I feel like a broken record, but like that's customer service. No matter what you do in the world, what your job is, if you deal with customers, right? Because that's what they are, clients, customers. There's the capacity to deal with people, that have attitudes like that.
absolutely.
I worked in a restaurant for years, and so you imagine, like, this is too cold, this is too hot. I didn't order this. I asked for this on the side. So that's nothing new. It just happens to also exist in your little bubble that you operate in. But
Yeah, and I think that some people just genuinely try because they do love what we do, and there are fans that I had when I started that I don't have anymore, and some of it is because they had to wait too long. There are some people who are still waiting, and I wholly recognize that, and I wholly acknowledge that there are times that life completely knocks me off my feet, and it takes me a minute because you mentioned this earlier, the energy it takes to be a creative person and do this, not everybody gets that. And we're still in a pandemic. I feel like we're on the other side, coming out of it. But we lost people. I lost a dozen friends, one of whom was a sketch card artist that was like a sister to me. But we're supposed to just get up and act like this doesn't happen. We don't always have that energy. And listen, that Kickstarter project I mentioned a while ago in this conversation, as much as Axe and I are trying as hard as we can to make it happen, we cannot help that certain things have happened along the way. It's the same thing, it may appear to be easy for those of us who sit down and do these beautiful masterpieces, but like you also alluded to earlier, you don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. If you ask, and it's okay to ask. Let me tell every collector watching this right now. If you give someone money for something and you negotiate a commission, a card, an AP, a pinup, whatever, you have every right to go, hey, I'm just checking in. I get a lot of people who say, I don't want to bug you. I'm not trying to nag. You're allowed to nag. Now, that doesn't mean you're allowed to be an a-hole. That doesn't mean you're allowed to be a jerk or rude about it. But if you communicate, and I had to learn this because early on, I didn't communicate that well because I was so busy and I wasn't glued to social media and I didn't have all these accounts. And I had to learn, okay, let me put this status out there. Going to the doctor. I fainted and gashed my head this week. That happened. I think I have COVID. I have to isolate and go get tested. That's happened 4 different times. There's just so many things. You just have to talk. And sometimes talking is asking questions. And sometimes that question should be, what kind of time frame am I looking at? Do you even have the time? Because anyone who asks me for an AP, the first thing I say is, I need you to understand that there is an approval process attached to this. And I play by the rules.
Right. Well, I think it's like what we've been kind of alluding to is that there's so much that goes on that people don't realize, and if we accomplish anything with these, just with yours, with the other interviews that I've done, it's to dispel the notion that you wake up, get out of bed, you splash a glass of orange juice on your face, you sit in front of a desk, and it's like poof, masterpiece. Because clearly there is a life's story of challenges and struggles and accomplishments that are all working behind the scenes, and then there's the whole the process of actually that's different from one piece to the next. So, like I said, hopefully some people have a better appreciation for how much has gone into throughout your life and how much goes into in each one in the future, and that they're still as excited as I am about owning your work, and encouraged to reach out to you because you are lovely, you are friendly, and you've been so open about your experience, I hope that you've enjoyed this. Because I did. I enjoyed researching it, and some of the questions I more or less knew your answer, but it was still, to hear it from you, and to sit here and just kind of see this whole story of you. It's been a great time. I really I don't see why anybody else won't feel the same way. This I know we've ran long, but there's not a lull in these 2 hours, right? This is all nonstop story, and it's good television. And seriously, and I feel like you can't make this up. This is your life. This is your work. This is your passion, and this is your heart and soul that you put into a piece of paper. And I want to speak for the community when I say thank you for everything you've done and everything you'll continue to do.
I am trying not to get emotional hearing that, because that's not something we hear very often. So I very much appreciate your candor, the research you did, even just giving artists a platform to go, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what you may know, but this is what you don't see or what you don't know. Because I think that kind of stuff is really important. And, not to equate us to celebrities by any means, because I don't ever want that kind of notoriety. But some people look at us that way and forget that we're people, or forget that there is a process, or that there is a life of ours outside of what we do. And getting so caught up in the excitement and the nostalgia and the even the business side of this, trading and flipping and selling and dealing cards. There's so much to it, and there's so much that goes into it, and there's so many things that happen behind the scenes. I mean, we could do a whole series of interviews every week and talk 2 hours every time about something different.
Right.
Yeah, it's what you're doing, I think, is really great, and I'm very thankful, not only for everything you've said, but also, being able to talk about it. And it Jesus, it's been 2 hours.
Yeah. And so I will say, it's been surreal how approachable the artists are, because I have had that celebrity attitude, like, oh my gosh, and it's still surreal to I might act comfortable and collected, but it's still surreal to have artists of your ability, reputation, stature, whatever you want to call it, here and willing to spend time with me. I'm grateful for the time, and I know other people are grateful for the time. Rhiannon Owens, Rhiannon Druitt. It's real easy, right? That's all of them, right?
Well, Twitter and Instagram. So I do Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yeah. Rhiannon Owens Art on Facebook and Rhiannon Druitt on Twitter and Instagram. Links will be in the description of the video. Thank you, guys. Check her out. She is an incredible artist. I wish I could, own that Polaris. I'm going to have to find the owner and break into their home. Not really. This is recorded. I shouldn't say things like that. Guys, have a great week. We will see you next time at Behind the Pencil. Thank you for joining us, and take care.